The scandal/cover-up of the week went mainstream thanks to a video revealing the inside of a bizarre tunnel built by a group of Hasidic Jewish men underneath a historic Brooklyn synagogue. The footage leads viewers downstairs and through hallways to a dirt-filled room where a roughly 2x2 grate has been removed from the wall of the building, which is adjacent to the Chabad-Lubavitch World Headquarters in Crown Heights, New York. The person filming crawls through the hole, which leads to a 3-foot-high dirt tunnel that reportedly extends about 50 feet and around 2 corners to the headquarters location of its shuttered men's ritual bath. Images show a beer can on the side of the tunnel and an electrical wire hanging. Loads of trash in the tunnels, including baby seats and strollers. The worst part? Soiled mattresses that seem too small to fit an adult. Soiled with what, precisely? Some say blood, others feces. In the adjacent building's dirt-filled room, clothes and other items can be seen scattered around, supposedly left by the renegade diggers of the Chabad-Lubavitch movement. The rogue members advanced by the late Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson had reportedly been digging the tunnel under the 100-year-old synagogue for nearly a year. The tunnel apparently was designed to reach the abandoned men's mikvah around the corner to expand the synagogue. Contradicting versions have said it was the opposite, to reach the women's mikvah instead, which sounds super sus either way. The tunnels were not discovered until last month, when neighbors reported suspicious noises coming from beneath their homes, and some men even reported hearing voices talking in Yiddish prior to the finding. Last Monday, the diggers tried to thwart cement truck workers attempting to undo their work at the request of synagogue authorities. They were filmed tearing down wood panels and wooden support beams as they desperately tried to get into their tunnel to protect it. NYPD officers arrived at the scene about 3:30 p.m. and arrested a dozen of them. A statement from the religious headquarters added, "These individuals have been squatting in the synagogue and attempted to take control by demolishing walls to connect the basement to the adjacent building, intending to expand the sanctuary. Steps are being taken to revoke their student visas and repatriate them to their countries of origin." According to Rabbi Moti Seligson, spokesman for Chabad-Lubavitch, some time ago, a group of extremist students broke through a few walls in adjacent properties to the synagogue at 784-788 Eastern Parkway to provide them unauthorized access. A cement truck was brought in to repair those walls. Those efforts were disrupted by the extremists who broke through the wall to the synagogue, vandalizing the sanctuary in an effort to preserve their unauthorized access. They have since been arrested and the building closed pending a structural safety review. The men were charged with criminal mischief, attempted hate crime, attempted criminal mischief, and reckless endangerment. All of the suspects live in Brooklyn. Now that's the cover-up version, so let's move to the hard-hitting facts. They found the tunnels at the literal Chabad World Headquarters. The most powerful Jews from every country fly in and out of here to discuss how to influence the leaders of their host nation. Yes, the Zionist agenda that drives the United States and the European Union foreign policy comes out from there. These are not mere Jews. These city characters are very powerful shakers and movers. They have been pulling the strings of every puppet president after John F. Kennedy. Whenever they want something done in the West, all they need to do is whisper. They manage to get things done immediately, and so they got these tunnels buried in cement immediately. A mikvah is used to immediately purify oneself after experiencing keri, or ejaculation of semen. According to the Torah, it is required to immerse oneself in a mikvah before being allowed to eat a teruma, or a korban, which is a slaughtered sacrificial offering. These unexplored Jewish tunnels are proven to lead south in the exact direction of 394 Kingston Avenue, 900 feet away from Chabad, and appear to be linked to a child rape case from 2 months ago. There is more. The tunnels are also connected to the local children's museum. What on earth is going on? According to an old scrubbed Vice article, at least 40%, possibly 50% of the Orthodox Jewish boys in New York have been raped by Jewish leaders. It is a rite of passage. Anyone trying to bring attention to these crimes is destroyed. The history of Chabad tunnels is centuries old and has always been linked to nefarious activity, such as ritual sexual abuse and sacrifice of children. Legends of old during medieval times spoke of Jewish witches and warlocks kidnapping Gentile children and sacrificing them inside underground caverns. Even Aleister Crowley stated that the real reason the pogroms happened was due to recurrent evidence of Jewish ritual sacrifice throughout Europe. Pogroms consisted of an organized massacre of Jewish people in Russia and Eastern Europe in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As a retaliation, the Jewish mafia injected communism into the region. Make no mistake, Crowley wasn't hating. On the opposite, he was studying the black magic arts to perfect them. These barbaric practices have been going on since the days of Noah. People who have nothing to hide don't build underground tunnels, period. Passovers of Blood by Ariel Toff is a recommended reading for anyone interested. If my suspicions are true, what was happening here is horrific. The police have arrested those who were trying to prevent the filling of the tunnels with cement, but why the rush? Shouldn't they be looking for evidence crimes were committed at this place? Especially considering the only reason why folks go underground is to partake in nefarious crimes. I gotta tell you, this has all the makings of a sex trafficking, ritual abuse situation.
Police make a wild discovery underneath a synagogue in Brooklyn.
An illegal tunnel found below the Chabad-Lubavitch World Headquarters in Crown Heights.
All right, Fox 5's Lisa Evers takes a look at how it was discovered.
The NYPD was called to a location best known as a sacred site for the Chabad-Lubavitch Orthodox Jewish sect. Authorities say a group of Jewish men who had a long simmering disagreement burrowed through tunnels under several buildings to break into the synagogue. They got into fights and destroyed fixtures.
The cement truck was here, and these individuals or some of their friends perhaps who broke through some of those adjoining properties disrupted the repairs and ultimately broke through the wall in the sanctuary and vandalized that wall as well. They've since been arrested.
Repairs have been underway for some time, as had the digging. The disruptor group reportedly stored their tools and equipment several buildings away in an unused mikvah, a large same-sex communal ritual bath space. Sources tell Fox 5 that forensic engineers and inspectors are investigating the structural integrity of surrounding buildings to make sure that they're safe.
This is obviously very distressing for the Lubavitch community and around the world and Jewish people everywhere. This is a site that's of great importance for Jews all around the world, and we're looking forward to the decorum and sanctity to be restored.
Rabbi Yehuda Krinsky, chairman of the Chabad-Lubavitch headquarters, said in a statement the Chabad-Lubavitch community is pained by the vandalism of a group of agitators who damaged the synagogue. The NYPD tells us that 12 men were arrested on a variety of felony and misdemeanor charges. A spokesperson for the Department of Buildings says building inspectors and forensic engineers are on the site and that they've opened an ongoing investigation. In Crown Heights, I'm Lisa Evers, Fox 5 News.
The U.S. Department of State has confirmed the death of citizen journalist Gonzalo Lara last Thursday, January 11. We can confirm the death of a United States citizen in Ukraine. We offer our sincerest condolences to the family and their loss. We stand ready to provide all appropriate consular assistance. Out of respect to the family, during this difficult time, we have no further comment. Lira, a 55-year-old citizen journalist with a dual Chilean-American nationality who was living in Ukraine when the Russian invasion started, made international headlines back in May 2023 when he was arrested for allegedly spreading Russian propaganda during wartime. Then, in early August, he popped back up again after months of silence in the most unusual way. He posted the English translation of his indictment to his X, formerly Twitter page, then posted a series of videos to his YouTube channel in which he's heading to the Hungarian border, admittedly trying to flee the country while out on bond.
Hey, how's it going? It's been a while. I hope you've had a good time. I didn't have such a good time. I spent 9.5 weeks in prison here in Ukraine. I've been out on bail since July 6th. Today is July 31st. And to prove the time, I just checked on my subscription. Defense Politics Asia, which is a pretty good channel, just put out a video called Niger on the Brink of Regional War. That should prove the time that I'm recording this video. Now, at the same time that I'm posting this video, I'm posting a long thread on my Twitter account. My Twitter account is Gonzalo Lara 1968. Gonzalo Lara 1968, one word altogether. And in that, I discuss what has happened to me over the past 3 months in some detail. I also include the indictment against me that I'm going to be tried on. I'm going to be tried on Wednesday, August 2nd, the day after tomorrow, as a matter of fact. I posted both the original Ukraine language version and the translation. The translation was by the court-appointed translator, so I have no idea if it's accurate or not. Those of you who speak Ukraine will be able to give a better sense as to whether that translation is accurate, but that's besides the point. I put up the entire indictment in both the original and the translation so that you can see exactly what I was charged with and imprisoned for. Now, the charges are very serious because the penalty is 5 to 8 years in a prison labor camp. I'm 55 years old, and some of you may know I have a fairly serious heart condition. I'm not going to survive 5 to 8 years. And I've already been told by people who would know that I will be found guilty. And because of circumstances, it would be convenient for me to serve out that sentence, for me to basically disappear. Disappear in a prison labor camp and, potentially die there, either naturally or unnaturally, as the case may be. Now, in the tweet thread, I go into more or less what happened. I composed that tweet thread last night. It took me 2 hours to do it because there was a lot of information and, keeping it to 25 tweets, it's tough. But anyway, the upshot is that I was accused of being a pro-Russian propagandist, basically, cut through the legalese, it was basically that. I was also accused of denying the Russian invasion, which is laughable. I mean, I've always said that the Russians invaded. It's self-evident, I never denied that fact. They said that I was justifying this invasion that was unprovoked, and of course, we all know that it was provoked. It didn't come out of the blue. It wasn't that the Russians one day decided, hey, let's just invade Ukraine. No, it was provoked, and I gave a very detailed explanation as to why it was provoked in a video that really chapped the ass of the prosecutor's office, apparently. The video of mine called Ukraine a Primer. which of course goes into the backstory and the history of relations between these two countries and why they wound up going to war as they are currently embroiled in. So anyway, the point is I'm going to be found guilty. And because of things that happened, corruption and extortion that happened in prison against me, I will be found guilty. I will not get a suspended sentence. I will have to serve out my term and likely die in this prison labor camp. Shit. Sorry, hang on. Sorry about that. I don't have 3 hands. Anyway, so realizing that my court date is the day after tomorrow, and realizing some other information that was quite strange, I was granted bail after innumerable hurdles, because when I was originally arrested, I was nominally supposed to get a lawyer, have access to a lawyer, be able to call my loved ones and arrange for bail. Now, insofar as lawyers, I have lawyers up the wazoo. Insofar as loved ones, not as many as lawyers, but I have quite a few that I care about very deeply, most especially my small children. For those of you who don't know, I have 2 children, Veronica, who is 10, she just turned 10. She turned 10 while I was in prison, and my son Ramon, who is 8. And of course, I wanted to talk to them, but I was not allowed to speak to them during the entirety of my stay in prison. And of course, I wasn't allowed to post bail, even though I had the means to post bail. Now, let me explain that situation, which was very interesting. You see, nominally, on the first day that I was arrested, I could have posted bail. But I was not given the opportunity to do so, to contact the people who would have the cash available to post my bail. And it wasn't that much, it was $11,000, which I don't want to sound arrogant. $11,000 is quite a bit of money for most people. I am blessed by the good fortune of having the means to put together that kind of money at a moment's notice. And so I could have posted bail on the very first day, but the authorities simply didn't allow me to do it, even though they said I could. Now, I was imprisoned briefly for 2 nights. I was in interrogatory prison number 1, that's the name of it. And then after that, I spent the remaining 9 weeks, exactly 9 weeks, in CISO prison, which is also an investigative prison. And that is a prison where individuals who have been accused of a crime are held while their case is investigated by either the police or the SBU who has arrested them. The SBU, for those of you who don't know, is the State Security Services of Ukraine. They are basically the descendants of the KGB, okay? So anyway, I wasn't allowed to post bail, and it was only through fairly heroic measures and a lot of pressure, political pressure from the government of Chile and apparently the State Department as well, because they didn't seem to like the fact that I wasn't being allowed to post bail. I spoke with representatives of the U.S. Embassy 3 times during the 9 weeks I was there. And they just gave me bromides. They made no effort to pull me out, you know. I mean, if only I'd been a black lesbian druggie or a transgender grifter, then maybe they would have done something. Well, no, if I'd been one of those 2 things, I would have been out instantly. But of course, since I'm not, yeah, and since a couple of people who would know have told me that Vicky Newland actually knows about me and hates my guts. So there you go. So anyway, the point is, there was the appearance of unfairness, so eventually I was allowed to post bail. But the bail conditions were very interesting because I had to surrender my passports. I had to wear electronic monitor. I wasn't allowed to leave the city of Kharkiv or the country. And they also confiscated, of course, all of my computers, my iPad, my iPhone. They also confiscated about $9,000 that I had as emergency cash, you know, the kind of cash you have around just in case of anything. Well, they confiscated that, and they confiscated a bunch of my documents, specifically my driver's license, my Chilean identity card, and the registration cards for my motorcycles. I don't own a car, by the way. And so I was told in no uncertain terms that I had to stay in Kharkiv and not leave the city under any circumstances, and of course not leave the country. And I would get this ankle monitor, and I would have to surrender my passports. But when I posted bail and was released, my passports were returned to me. I didn't get any kind of ankle monitor. And a few days later, I went to the SBU offices of the investigator who had investigated my case, and he returned my driver's license, my Chilean ID card, and my registration documents for my motorcycles. As you can see, there's my bike. I don't know if you can see it properly. There you go. These are the options that I have. Since I know I'm going to be found guilty and I will be sent to a prison labor camp, and because of events that happened in prison where I was extorted for a sizable amount of money, I will be sent to a prison labor camp come my court date. That's inevitable. Okay? And there won't be any suspended sentence and there won't be any mercy, all because of my YouTube videos. I mean, I want to emphasize this, In the indictment, if you read it, you will see that the prosecutor himself says that I committed no crime against any person or property, and that my crimes are literally speech crimes, saying things that the government doesn't like. Ukraine is supposed to be this big democracy, that it wants to join the European Union and because it has European values, European democratic values. What higher value does a democracy have than free speech? My case is all about free speech, and I spent 2 months and change in a maximum security prison. And by the way, when I say, okay, well, let me finish that point. I spent 2 months and change in a maximum security prison over things that I said, opinions I gave regarding publicly available information that is undisputed. This is the epitome of free speech, and yet I went to prison for it, and I will likely go 5 to 8 years to a prison labor camp where, by the way, everybody in the CISO prison, the investigative prison where I was at, none of them wanted to go to that labor camp because they all said it's a death sentence, okay? And so I'm going to be sent for 5 to 8 years because of YouTube videos that I made. Is that democratic? Does that sound like, European values to you? Sorry if this video is a little bit disorganized, because I'm a little bit stressed out, but the choices I realize are two. Either go to a prison labor camp and die there. Because like I said, I'm 55, I have a heart condition, so as it is, I'm not going to live much longer. And 5 to 8 years at a prison labor camp, I'll be dead. I'll be killed off by the labor, I suppose. And if not, I will be killed on the inside, because what happened while I was at CISO, I realized that let me backtrack a little. While I was in CISO, I was extorted for a great deal of money, $70,000 to be precise. Now, how did this happen? Well, through various clues and various information that I acquired, which I intend to describe in detail in a book about the whole thing, if I live long enough to write that book. But anyway, the point is, I realized that once they arrested me on May 1st, the SBU, of course, confiscated my computers, and they got into all of my accounts, which they hadn't done before. Because what had happened was that one of the computers, I had left it in my motorcycle, and when they detained me that time, they hadn't realized that I had left it in my motorcycle, because, you know, it has these, I don't know if you can see them, it has these suckers, right? And so, in that computer, that was my personal computer, with my they're all personal computers, but I mean, with my personal information, including my accounts. And while I was in prison, the SBU looked through my accounts and they realized that I'm not poor. Okay, I don't want to characterize it in any other way, but I have access to a lot of funds, and the way I live is fairly simply and low-key. I don't even own a car because I was fortunate enough to earn a great deal of money as a writer when I was very, very young. And so I went through that phase of buying all the toys and all the crap that you really don't need to make your life happy. But I was young and I thought that I needed that crap. And so I bought it. And then I realized, of course, it didn't make me particularly happy. And now, as a much older and hopefully wiser man, I don't have any of that crap. I don't need it. And so the SBU had assumed that I was just some poor schmuck, but when they saw my accounts, they realized that I wasn't a poor schmuck. And so what happened was that they got the prisoners in CISO, in one of the 4 cells I was in, the last one, the worst one. It was 7 other prisoners and myself. And as soon as I arrived, they beat the shit out of me. And they tortured me that time. It started on June 21st at 1 p.m. and it lasted 30 hours. It included beatings, it included sleep deprivation. You know, I've been beaten up, so it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's not fun. It hurts, yeah, sure. But, you know, when I was young, you know, yeah, I got into street fights and crap like that. And sometimes I won, and sometimes I got the shit kicked out of me. So the beatings I could handle, but when they started getting really, really pissed off at me, because I kept insisting that I was just a journalist and I didn't have a pot to piss in and I had no money and I could not get them $70,000, thinking that they'd lay off, thinking too and realizing too that extortionists, when you give in to them and you pay them, then they'll come back the next day and want more. And they'll beat you some more for more money, right? And so, of course, I denied the fact. I said I was just a poor writer, that I was living in Ukraine because it was so cheap and all the rest of it, you know. Poor me, I don't have a pot to piss in. But they knew, and they kept insisting. And a very specific number, 70,000. And what really unnerved me was that in the hour, maybe 25, 26, 2 of these thugs held my head, and one of them used a toothpick to scratch the whites of my left eye. And the other guy, the guy who actually spoke a little bit of English, said, "You can read with just one eye, right?" Not gonna lie, that really freaked me out. Anyway, after about 30 hours of this, I realized that there was no escape for me. By the way, the guards came in because they do a nightly check-in to see that everything's copacetic, you know? And the thing is, see, I saw that these guys had bribed those guards, bribed them with cigarettes and other things, because there's no money in the prison, but there are, you know, little perks, little this and that, knickknacks and whatnot. And so the guards who did the nightly check-in were on the take, and they were in league with the gangsters, the thugs, in my prison cell. And so I realized that this could last indefinitely. And so while I still had all my marbles, you know, because the sleep deprivation really affects you. And I've just, out of idle curiosity, because I'm that way, a few years ago when I was living in Amsterdam, I tried to see how long I could go without any sleep. I went, I want to say like 60 hours. And I remember being surprised by the hallucinations which came on around after 40 hours or so. And I thought they were pretty cool, but after about 60 hours, that's when I was just out of it. And it was just out of idle curiosity that I did it, because like I said, I'm kind of weird, you know, what the fuck can I say? And so after 30 hours, yeah, I was hallucinating a little bit, you know, I was like seeing writing on the floor when there was none, of course, and little things like that, like little wormies moving around, you know. But anyway, the important point, I realized I'd have to give up the ghost because nobody was going to save me. And so I started negotiating and stretching out this payment that I had to make. Because, you see, my bank accounts, in order to make a transfer, you need a little device that's a token that generates a number. So it's impossible to transfer any money without that little token, and those tokens are apps in my iPad and phone. And on top of that, because there's so much hacking going on from Ukraine, my banks, the websites to my banks to check certain accounts, the big ones, right? You can't access them from Ukraine, and my bank had to do special carve-outs, specific IP addresses that are tied to specific locations, and that's why and those locations, of course, were far from Cecil Prison. That's why it was impossible for me to access those accounts, but it was possible for me to access a PayPal account that I had. Now, a PayPal account, it had quite a bit of money. It had $143,000, because it's just money that I've earned on my Patreon. And it's great money, but I do the Patreon more for the ego trip and getting more subscribers as opposed to needing the money. And so the money had just accumulated. I was just sitting there. And the SBU obviously found it and saw it. And that's why they were asking for that very specific number of 70,000, which is just about half of the amount of money in that account. Now, I don't know if they wanted to be nice about it and just take half, or if they were going to take half and they were going to pass me along to somebody else who would take the other half. I have no idea. Now, I'm telling you all of this so that you understand my situation. My case originally started as a free speech issue. But because of the SBU and the inherent corruption of the SBU and the criminal justice system in Ukraine, I will definitely be sent to a prison labor camp where I will most certainly die. And so I decided that the smart thing was take my chances in terms of getting across the border. Right now, I'm maybe 5 kilometers away from the border with Hungary. Over the last 2 days, I rode my bike just about 1,300 kilometers from Kharkiv all the way here to the border. And my intention is to cross the border, get to Hungary, and in Hungary, I'm going to ask for political asylum. Now, why Hungary? And why ask for political asylum? Very simple. You see, when I don't show up at my court date on Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, there will be an arrest warrant issued for me. Now, of course, this arrest warrant, they will presume that I left the country, so it will become an international arrest warrant. Now, the European Union, which is allied with Ukraine, to its perdition, as many of you know in terms of the European economies, well, the Europeans will comply with this international arrest warrant, and they will scoop me up at the first chance. And it won't matter that it's a free speech case. It won't matter, nothing will matter except complying. If I were to go to Poland or Slovenia or Romania, all of these little gremlins of the EU, they're going to scoop me up instantly and return me to the graces of the SBU and the criminal justice system, and eventually I'll wind up in a prison labor camp. I'm hoping that Hungary, which has shown some independence insofar as these matters are concerned, of complying with idiotic EU regulations and diktats. I'm hoping that the authorities in Hungary will look at my indictment, realize that it has nothing to do with me being an actual bona fide criminal in terms of harming people or property, and it's really a strictly free speech issue, an issue of democratic speech. And I'm hoping that the Hungarian authorities will show some mercy and some understanding and grant me this political asylum. That's my hope. By the way, I don't know anybody in Hungary. I've been to Budapest, once for a long weekend. It was lovely. But I don't know anybody in Hungary. I don't have any relations with Hungarians of any sort. I dated a Hungarian girl once, years ago, but other than that, I don't have any connection to Hungary. And so I'm really going to be throwing myself at their mercy, hoping that they will see through this bullshit and realize that it's grossly unfair and it is just despicable. That's the only word I can think of. And so, yeah, that's my situation. And so as this video goes live, at the time that it goes live, I'm going to be crossing the border. And I'm going to be hoping that my name doesn't appear on any system and that I'll be allowed through. That's my hope. If my name is on some system, on some list that they have at the border, then I'll be arrested and it will be effectively a death sentence. And so I'm posting this video so that people know what happened to me if I really disappear. I'm certainly scared, sure, but fear doesn't really help the situation now, does it? You have to be clear. You have to be clear and you have to look at the options. And I've thought about this situation very, very carefully. And between the absolute certainty of going to a prison labor camp if I show up in court on Wednesday, and the slim chance that I might be able to cross the border, I'll take my chances. Some people might think that, why don't you just sneak across some empty field or something like that? That's laughable, okay? For the obvious fact that, of course, if you sneak into Europe, across some field, right? Later they're going to ask you, well, how did you get into Europe? What's that all about? Where's your entry stamp? I mean, it causes all kinds of problems. I mean, I looked at the possibility, by the way. It's not as easy as you think. You think that it's just sneaking across some field. No. It's not, okay? First of all the access points between one country and the other are monitored, okay? And fairly easy. They just have motion detectors. And if anything moves, then the cameras go on and they know exactly what's going on, okay? So that's not an option. As opposed to going to Russia, Kharkiv, after all, is 40 kilometers from Russia. It should have been easy, right? Well, no, because all that area is mined. And, both sides, though they're not fighting in that particular area, not yet, they know what's going on. They keep a close eye on that crossing. So you can't go through there. Another option that I was seriously considering was going to the front, going to the contact line, and thinking to myself, maybe there is some spot in the contact line that is being used by civilians, refugees, going back and forth. But that turned out to be a non-starter. I was surprised. I mean, the front is over 1,000 kilometers long, but there is no real spot where you can easily move, not without a guide, not without somebody who knows what they're doing. I also looked into the possibility of somebody helping me out, and a couple of them were grifters. It was clear as day, they wanted money. And the others, they had a lot of good intentions, but they didn't know what the hell they were doing. And so ultimately I was not able to find a Sherpa, a guide, who could get me through. So that's my situation. And yeah, I'm going to chance it at the border.
Since that video upload, There has been no word on his condition or whereabouts. It was then confirmed that the Ukrainian forces rearrested him before he was able to cross the border to Hungary to seek political asylum. That was the last nail in the coffin for the citizen journalist. At the time, a statement by a U.S. State Department spokesperson read, "We are aware of the detention of Mr. Lira in Ukraine. We take our role in assisting U.S. citizens abroad seriously and are providing all appropriate assistance. We are monitoring the situation but have no further comment at this time. We reiterate our message that U.S. citizens should not travel to Ukraine due to the active armed conflict." In his last video uploaded to his YouTube channel, Lira claimed that the prosecution threatened him with a sentence of multiple years in a prison labor camp, which he stated would lead to his certain death. Despite Lira's American citizenship, the United States administration did nothing to seek his liberation and even seemed to support his imprisonment and torture. The blogger was arrested on charges of production and dissemination of materials justifying Russia's armed aggression against Ukraine. As it turns out, he was commenting on the conflict while being a harsh critic of the midget warmonger, cokehead, Volodymyr Zelensky. The SBU insists that the journalist was arrested and given bail just to violate the law soon after while attempting to flee the country on his motorcycle via a checkpoint on the border with Hungary. According to the latest data, Lira was at a pretrial detention facility in Kharkiv. The journalist was born in Burbank, California, and began as a writer of detective novels and thrillers, transitioning to film in Chile. After 2010, he relocated to Ukraine where he married a local woman and settled in Kharkiv near the Russian border. Simultaneously, he became an economic commentator for Business Insider. In 2017, Lira, now calling himself Coach Red Pill, started a blog for men on pickup techniques while providing relationship advice. In November 2021, he deleted most relationship-related videos, dropped his moniker, began using his real name, and denied reports that Russia was preparing for an invasion. On February 23, 2022, a day before the invasion, he arrived in Kiev on business. As the full-scale attack unfolded, Lira actively covered events in Ukraine. Naturally, his detention further exposed the tyrannical tendencies of the Ukrainian regime and spurred opposition movements against U.S. funding for the conflict. Prominent controlled opposition figures such as tech mogul Elon Musk and Fox News host Tucker Carlson advocated for his release, drawing international attention to his case. Talks between Lira and the U.S. Embassy highlighted concerns about his declining health. A handwritten note from the prisoner detailed his health issues, including double pneumonia, pneumothorax, and severe edema, alleging neglect and delayed medical attention while detained.
A lot of people ask, how did the war between Ukraine and Russia start in 2022? They ask to know the causes and the reasons and why did it start? And see, right there in the question, there are two mistakes. Why did the war between Russia and Ukraine start in 2022? Two mistakes. The first one is the year, because the war didn't start in 2022. It started in 2013. In 2013, there was a coup d'etat in Ukraine, and it was called, after the fact, the Revolution of Dignity, the Maidan Revolution, the Freedom Revolution. But it wasn't a revolution, it was a coup d'etat, it was a color revolution. And what a color revolution is very simply, you see, a legitimate grievance arises among the people. And they protest, like people usually do. And in such situations, normally, the leadership will react and adjust and change to, quiet down the masses, as they usually do in all of human history. But see, a color revolution is basically when American money and European money in NGOs bring out agents provocateurs, basically thugs, to infiltrate the crowd of peaceful protesters. And these thugs ramp up the violence They ramp up the violence to an extreme. And so, of course, the police, in the face of this violence, they have to use violence of their own to shut it down. And, of course, innocent people die in such a situation. And those innocent people are then raised up as the victims, the martyrs of the evil regime. And the agents provocateur, they egg on the people to go into the government buildings and smash open the buildings and invade the buildings, because they keep saying, we, the people, it's a democracy, these are our buildings, the buildings of the people. And so the mob goes into the government buildings and takes it over. The thugs take it over. See? That's how color revolutions work. And if you're thinking January 6th, very good. High marks, a little gold star on your forehead. So anyway, in 2013 and 14, this color revolution happened. And the people who took over were basically puppets of the Americans. The Americans picked the government that was going to be put in place after this revolution, which was really a coup d'etat. And following this revolution, i.e. coup d'etat, engineered by the Americans and the American NGOs that were in Ukraine paying for these thugs, well, what happened was that Russia became extremely alarmed, and all of a sudden there was a war between Ukraine and Russia in the Donbass area, the southeast area of Ukraine, because those people in the southeast, they wanted no part of this new government, because this new government was ultra-nationalist, which sounds all good and fine, until you realize that Ukraine is essentially a country divided between ethnic Russians and ethnic Ukrainians. And the ethnic Ukrainians and the extreme nationalists that were put into power following the Maidan revolution, the Maidan coup of 2013 and 14, well, those people hated the ethnic Russians, and the ethnic Russians were concentrated in the Donbass area. And so they started to go in there trying to pacify this area that wanted no part of their nonsense. And of course, all of a sudden, shooting starts, shelling starts, fighting starts, and the Russians in Russia, wanting to defend the people in the Donbass, because it really was a genocide. The neo-Nazis who went down to the Donbass to pacify the area were real neo-Nazi, Azov crazy people. Well, the Russians and the Ukrainian armies started clashing in the Donbass. That's essentially what happened. I'm simplifying it grossly, but for the sake of this short video, it's enough for you to understand. And in 2015, there was an agreement made, a ceasefire agreement called the Minsk Agreements. And these agreements were brokered by Germany and France. And this agreement was a roadmap to peace in the Donbass. But the new regime in Ukraine refused to accept it. I mean, they signed it because their arm was basically twisted for reasons that are complicated, and so just take my word for it. But they signed it, but they never lived up to it. And for the next 8 years, they kept shelling the Donbass, kept attacking it. That's why now there are all these fortifications. Why do you think they built them over 8 years? Because those fortifications were to defend against the war that the Ukrainians were constantly fomenting. They were constantly shelling Lugansk and Donetsk, those two cities, and also the entire regions. 16,000 people died in the 8 years. So the war did not start in 2022. The war just came to a crescendo in 2022. And in fact, there is reputable intelligence at this time that indicates that the Ukrainian army was gathering in southeast Ukraine because they were getting ready for a blitzkrieg attack on Lugansk and Donetsk in order to take them over, finally, and end this perpetual conflict. And the proof of this is the fact that there are roughly 100,000 soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, right there, right now, being encircled by the Russian army. Because what happened in February 24th, essentially, the Russians beat them to the punch. There was going to be an open war in the Donbass regardless. The Ukrainians were going to attack and try to capture and conquer and pacify the Donbass region. And the Russian army just beat them to it, and now here we are. But there are two mistakes that you made in your question. Why did this war between Russia and Ukraine start in 2022? As I explained, it started in 2014. But it's not a war between Ukraine and Russia. It's between Russia and the United States by way of NATO. Because NATO, what is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? It is an American alliance. America is the big dog of the alliance, and it's got all these little chihuahuas around it. You know, France, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, all these little chihuahuas, and the US, the big dog, with all the big weapons. And NATO, of course, is this big money-making machine, because in order to be a part of the NATO alliance, you have to buy American weapons, and you have to pay in dollars for these American weapons, okay? I mean, you got to understand that NATO is a big old financial scam, but apart from that, you see, the reason to overthrow the Yanukovych regime in 2014, which is what happened. The president Yanukovych was overthrown, and he was not really pro-Russian. He was basically trying to play both sides off the middle, you know, like all politicians do. But anyway, he was overthrown because what NATO, i.e. the United States, wanted to do was to install in Ukraine a pro-America regime, which they did. The Poroshenko regime followed by the Zelensky regime. And these regimes were all puppets. Do you know that a lot of the ministers, the cabinet members of the Ukrainian government after 2014 were in fact American citizens? They were all appointed by the American State Department. Yeah, if not appointed, they were approved by the American State Department. And like I said, some of these cabinet members were actually American citizens until 2 days before their appointment. I'm not kidding. One of them was Georgia, you know. He was brought in from Georgia because he's, you know, pro-Western. He's one of our guys, you see? And so this is really not Ukraine versus Russia. This is NATO, i.e. the United States, versus Russia. Because the Americans, you know, they're too chicken shit to just go up and do the job themselves and fight themselves. No, they use the Ukrainian proxies. See? That's what's been going on here. NATO, the US, they've been at war with Russia, and that war started in 2007. It started in February of 2007 when Vladimir Putin gave a very, very famous speech called the Munich speech. It was this big powwow of all these international leaders. And they were going to be talking about, you know, the future and globalism and blah, 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 you know, the usual garbage, right? And the thing is, see, up to this time, up to 2007, Vladimir Putin was considered our guy in Russia. He was considered a man we can work with in Russia. And the thing is, he had been installed in 1999 with the support of the West. Yeltsin, Boris Yeltsin, the president at the time, you know, besotted alcoholic that he was, he had been convinced to put Putin. And Putin had taken the job, a former KGB agent, considered very cautious, very reliable, a man who follows orders. And the thing is, see, everything was working hunky-dory insofar as Vladimir Putin running Russia. I mean, you look at the New York Times from those years, and there were articles praising him and what a great leader he was and all this nonsense, right? But in 2007, he gave this speech in Munich. And in this speech, he basically said that the age of the unipower, the United States, was coming to an end. And the problem with the unipower is that the unipower, and he said it, ballsy, right to their face, he said that the unipower resorted to hyper-violence whenever it didn't get its way. You know, this landed like a ton of bricks on these people, okay? Because there were all kinds of leaders there, okay? And they were all looking. All the European leaders were there. They were like kind of horrified. And you look at the video, it's kind of funny because they did not expect this speech at all. It's a long speech and it's worth reading. It's one of the most important speeches of this century because it's, in essence, a declaration of war. Because Vladimir Putin is basically saying, we don't want to live in a unipolar world where all power is concentrated in Washington. We don't want to live in a place where it's basically a dictatorship, a pyramid, where everything is in Washington and everybody is subordinated to Washington. We want to live in a multipolar world where it is inevitable that there are going to be concentrations of power, but they're going to be distributed around the world. And what we want is global security, indivisible security, where all of us feel confident and free and secure so that we can pursue our lives. We can trade, we can build houses, we can build families, we can do everything that we all each want to do with our lives. But it should be done in a multipolar regime, a multipolar system, not a unipolar system. The United States should not be the dictator of the world. That's what he said. And the West correctly, the Americans very correctly, interpreted that speech as a declaration of war. And the war started slowly. I mean, in 2007 and 2008, we had the global financial crisis, which hit Russia, hit everybody. I mean, it was a big disaster. And so the war kind of like didn't happen, even though there were things going on in Syria and all the rest of it, right? But then in 2013, 2014, with Ukraine, that's when it was clear. That's when everyone knew the war is on. And it's not Ukraine, Russia. That's just a proxy. Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian nation will be thrown as a sacrifice in this war because it's a proxy war that's going on. Ukraine, they are facing the brunt of this battle. But it's really a war between the United States and Russia. You have to understand this. If you don't understand this, you're not going to understand the whole picture. You're not going to understand how everything is connected because in this war, well, this war is global. Everybody's so worried that, World War III might start anytime soon. Brother, you're in it. This is the Third World War. This is it. And this that's going on here in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, which I can hear, right outside my window, I am telling you, man, this is just the first battlefield. But this war is going on around the world, socially, culturally, economically, politically, militarily. It's going on all fronts, and it's all connected. And once you start to realize it, then you start to see the connections. Then you start to see what's really going on. Understand. The war between Ukraine and Russia did not start in 2022. The war between America and the rest of the world started in 2007.